Hi. Hello. Hello. Hi. Ooh, glasses aren't even on straight. Wow. Hi. I'm making an extra effort to be here. I know I'm late and I didn't read my Halloween story and but I know my dad's been looking for me. I just want him to know, hi Dad, I'm fine. Just busy. Had a, took I don't know, took a moment off and totally spaced Frankenstein Tea yesterday. And and here I am today late, and I'm not going to read my Halloween story, but I will read that story sometime. Doesn't only have to be for Halloween. It's just a scary story. And I'm just going to read something quick and short today because I got a couple things going on here. One is that the water company tells me this building has a leak and water is running, but I can't find it. So I have to scour around and figure out what's leaking around here. Hi, Dad. So I'll just read you a couple quick things and then I'll go back to being a plumber because that's what library directors are. They're everything. So today I'm a plumber and I'm going to go figure out some plumbing. It's a little nerve-wracking because I really can't find it and I don't know what's happening and I'm not getting any support, but I'm not going to be cranky about it. I'm just going to read you something and then get back to it. And let's see. I could read a few things, but you know what? Maybe I'm going to read this and then I'll maybe read one more. So this is from the Monkey's Fist, which is Houlihan's book, J.V. Houlihan's book. And these are always good. And, maybe will settle me a little. And I know, Dad, you'll like it. So here we go. This one is very short, but maybe I'll read another. This is called Gulls Away by Houlihan from the Monkey's Fist and other stories from the Block Island Ferry. Gulls Away. You're on the ferry Manitou on a typical summer day. The boat is backing into her slip in Point Judith from her 12 o'clock trip off Block Island. You notice how busy the parking lot is, the lines of people waiting to board ferries, standard stuff. But then you see two seagulls on the roof line of the freight shed. They appear to be tugging on something, stepping back and forth, wings fluttering, screeching. You wonder where this seagull drama will go. You also wonder, is this a dating ritual for seagulls? Are they playing King of the Roof? You ponder these things as the gulls come closer to the edge of the roof line. A grim reality enters your mind. The gulls are going to fall off the peak. A slight gasp escapes your lungs as this drama unfolds in slow motion. You suddenly realize that you're witnessing the two gulls cartwheeling through the air, beaks connected, screeching, and then landing on some poor guy's head. His eyes bulge as his body jerks in a puppet-like manner. You notice the guy looking confused and befuddled. Then he looks crestfallen, stunned. He looks at the crews on the loading ramp, laughing hysterically, and then he runs, crimson-faced, back into the building. It's now that you connect the dots as to what is happening, as are many other passengers. Two seagulls are fighting over a tinker mackerel or herring or some other helpless and unlucky aquatic creature. One gull wrestles the helpless fish away from his foe. The other is lying on its back from this fray, flapping his wings and trying to right itself. The lucky seagull is gagging the fish into his gullet. This is not a pretty sight, but remember, this is a fishing port. Succeeding in swallowing the fish, the gull takes flight. The other gull quickly follows. This is what seagulls do. They scavenge for food, and sometimes it gets very primal. When resources get scarce, seagulls get vicious. As you walk off the boat, you look for the crestfallen, red-faced, and mortified guy, but you don't see him because he's hiding in the men's room, trying to regain his composure and steeling himself for the next bout of laughter from the crew standing on the ramp. The guy you are looking for is me, the author. Just another day in paradise, folks. That's good. I hadn't pre-read that. That's fun. That's fun. Let's see. This one is a couple of pages. So I want to find something just a little shorter. Well, I've read a lot of things from here. Let's see. Can I find something? I kind of want to read this, even though it's a couple pages. Okay, settle in. Settle in. I'm going to read you a couple pages because my dad's been looking for me and he loves a boating story. So this one's for you, Dad. Settle in, everybody. Get your tea. Take a breath. Take a time out. Frantic here with my water problem. But, it's also a big day before Election Day. So let's share this one together. Haven't pre-read it, but I think I can usually do Houlihan cold. So let's see what happens. This is called Prudence, Patience, and Hope, a sailing story. It is impossible not to personify a ship. Everybody does in everything they say. She behaves well. She minds her rudder. She swims like a duck. She runs her nose into the water. She looks into a port. Then that wonderful esprit de corps by which we adopt her into our self-love, everything we touch, makes us all champions of her sailing qualities. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Sean Jenks knew he had to go to the bow of his boat immediately, no flinching, and with all his energy ready to commit to this decision. He crouched and moved forward. The late October morning came with a steady southwest wind. Celtic Legend, a 30-foot Ericsson, felt every slight wind shift and moved with steady assertiveness. Sean woke up to the loud clacking sound of halyards slapping the mast. The blonde Norwegian sailor was on his mind. However, her blue eyes and blonde hair were not what he was thinking of. He was thinking about the inside of her boat. It was a 30-foot sloop, 3 boats away in the mooring field, a good flirting distance. The cabin was clean, bright, and very organized. She even had nice dresses on hangers. His was disheveled yet functional. Clothes hung on hooks. He never understood how people kept their boats so clean. Slowly, his angular, wiry frame rose from his bunk. The pain in his left knee was brutal. A torn meniscus would be operated on soon. He'd had enough pain and finally listened to his doctor. Celtic Legend swung 25 degrees as she was hit by a gust, and he noticed the blonde's boat from the companionway. When Sean decided to sail Celtic Legend, it was always a seamless decision. Sitting in the cockpit with a cup of coffee, he figured this was the day he would sail his new boat around Prudence Island in Narragansett Bay. He'd wanted to do this sail all summer long, but his knee pain was prohibitive. Moreover, his dad's illness and subsequent operations had put him in a place where sailing was not important. Legend's diesel sputtered to life, and he went into a zen-like dance of preparation. After he secured things below, he went forward and released the pennant from the bow cleat, and Celtic Legend drifted away from her mooring. He steered her through the crowded mooring field and out into open water just south of the Newport Bridge. The joy of power reaching downwind, the wind on the stern quarter, always amazed this monastic middle-aged man. As the line from the roller furling was released, the headsail popped. Grinding in the sheet was Sean's way of putting the spurs to Celtic Legend. As she galloped, He exhaled the primitive howl of a happy man. This sail would be a downwind sprint to the north end of Prudence. Because the wind was airing up pretty hard, Sean only used the 135 Genoa to power up Celtic Legend. He knew that when rounding the north end of the island, he did not want to be over-canvassed while making the upwind sail back to Newport. As Celtic Legend and her skipper headed north under the bridge, the anemometer said the wind was blowing 15 to 18 knots with occasional 20-knot gusts. On this point of sail, she was moving at 7 knots against an outgoing tide. He wedged himself into the starboard corner of the cockpit, steering with his foot while he drank cold coffee. He didn't know he wouldn't leave the helm for 6 hours. The outgoing tide was horsing out of the East Passage. He noticed the steep 3 to 4 foot waves as he passed the ferry landing at Homestead, Prudence Island's center of activity. The wind-fetched waves were a result of the strong funneling winds, the smoking sou'wester, that were screaming up the bay against the tide. As Celtic Legend changed course a few degrees to the northwest, Sean thought back to when his passion began. To the starboard side lay Bristol Harbor. He was 3 or 4 years old the day his family took a Sunday drive to the harbor, and he remembered being parked near the water. Off the beach, there was a beamy white catboat, dancing and undulating in the 2-foot chop. This image was imprinted in his psyche at that moment and stayed to this very day. It was as if the fates had said, "Okay, kid, you will be a sailor." It was that simple. Heading northwest, he found himself in some slack wind in the lee of Homestead. Flat water appeared and the wind lightened to about 10 knots. He wondered when the gust would come. It was only a matter of time. Celtic Legend zipped along on a fat, broad reach, leaving this point of sail. Suddenly, the wind slammed her port stern quarter and Legend adjusted. She surged ahead with assurance and purpose. The anemometer was pinned at 22 knots. Still in the lee of Homestead, she accelerated to an impressive 8 knots. Sean realized that today he was going to get a chance to wring her out a bit and see what this boat could do. He knew things would get dicey as he rounded the north end of the island. As he sailed by the gap between Prudence and Patience Island, another gust of wind slammed Legend. In the lee of Patience, the wind was blowing a steady 25 knots. He knew the ride from hell was about to begin. As he sailed out into the wind-fetched bay, Legend took the first pounding seas. He braced himself into the leeward side of the cockpit and fired up the diesel. The engine would give him a little help heading her upwind, seeing how now only half of the Genoa out. Celtic Legend was pounding along at 7 knots. A couple of hours passed and he was off the north end of Jamestown. It had been a long slog to windward. A few more tacks and maybe the blonde sailor would like to get some dinner, he thought to himself. All of a sudden, Legend hobby-horsed into a 5-foot hole. The bow slammed down into the trough and shuddered. Sean felt like Odysseus, almost home to Ithaca and his beloved Penelope, only to have the winds of Aeolus send him back to sea. He cracked off to a broad reach and aimed for another harbor. This called for a new plan. It was getting hectic at this point. Celtic Legend was flying along at 11 knots, surfing down 5-foot seas, a rarity in the bay. The boat was surging ahead, death rolling port to starboard. There was so much torque in the rigging from the wind gusts. It felt as if the stern was getting lifted out of the water. The wind was exceeding 40 knots, and Sean's adrenal glands and neurotransmitters were at the tipping point. Sean read once about the idea of the acceleration of catastrophe, which is basically another way to describe Murphy's Law, or as he would say, faster into disaster. The aforementioned began when the self-tailing winch released a fully loaded jib sheet. With a loud snapping sound, the sail went flying into the headstay, flailing and out of control. As the boat was sliding down the slippery, sloppy seas, snap rolling side to side, a decision had to be made. Sean made this decision with cold, adrenaline-focused acuity. The jib sheet was tangled and needed attention. This was a rock and a hard place. Again, he felt like Odysseus. Leaving the helm of a boat is not wise under normal conditions, but this was his only choice. The trick was to make it up to the bow, untangle the sheet, and get back to the helm before she breached. It was all about steering, pitching, and yawing. Falling overboard was not an option. He brought Celtic Legend a few degrees to port, took a deep breath, crouched, and darted forward. The boat rolled hard to port, and the rail went under. Sean hesitated, regained his footing, and lunged for the mast. With only one arm around the mast for support, he tried to grab the tangled, snapping sheet. He finally got hold of it and gave it a hard pull. This was enough to undo the messing line and get the sail free of the headstay. The boat rolled again to port, and her bow shifted a few degrees. Broaching was imminent. He held onto the mast as the boat hung near the zero moment, very close to a knockdown. He scrambled aft as water rushed by his knees. Grabbing the handrail on the cabin trunk, he hoisted himself up into the cockpit and corrected the helm. Still surging along at 10 knots, he pointed the boat toward the north end of Hope Island. Passing Hope, he then hardened her up and headed for Allen Harbor. After he tied Celtic Legend to the dock, he forgot about the blonde, the dinner, and flirting. All good things by his standards and view of things. But, he mused, it took Odysseus years to get back to his Penelope, and he didn't know if the blonde sailor even was his Penelope. Thinking about women always baffled him. Sean shook his perplexed head and giggled himself into a deep sleep. The next morning, as he and Legend made their way back to Newport, the southwest wind was light to moderate. Sean Jenks felt relaxed and very calm as the warm October sun rose from the east. He and his boat would carry what they learned about each other the previous day for many years to come. The Monkey's Fist stories from Houlihan. He still works at the ferry. Many of you know him. Good ones today. Okay, I'm off to look for a leak. Lucky me. Be well, everybody. Wear your mask. Stay warm. Wash your hands. Keep your group small. Eat your vegetables. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. All right. Bye, Dad. Peace.